Time to talk about One Piece. This is like gonna be the only editing in this video. You know what One Piece is. Everyone knows what One Piece is. It's the most famous manga of all time. It's the best-selling manga. Everyone knows what One Piece is. It's the pirate one that's really long. Well, you know, it got an adaptation by Netflix pretty recently, and people said it was pretty good. You know, I found it entertaining. I watched it and I was like, that sure was a not terrible adaptation of One Piece. But people are giving it too much credit, okay? Like, the other day, I saw some people talking about the Avatar live action, and people didn't like it. And they were like, oh, you know, this is nothing compared to the One Piece live action. That was a really faithful adaptation. And I just immediately thought, okay, pause. No, it wasn't. I'm not some kind of, you know, One Piece scholar. I don't know everything about it. I just like the series a lot. But I can tell it's not a good adaptation. I could give every kind of reason under the sun as to why the live action adaptation fumbles all kinds of things. And that's what I'm going to do, because I got annoyed with arguing with people on the internet, so I decided I'm going to make a video and I'm going to talk about it. And I decided to structure this video by going character by character and really interrogating why it screwed them up, because that's the easiest way to do it. And One Piece is a character-driven story, and all good stories are character-driven stories, let's be honest. And One Piece is no exception. So, let's begin this criticism of why the One Piece live action kind of drops the ball on every single element. Not that it was the worst thing in the world, it was entertaining, but it could have been so much better. Part 1. The Straw Hats. You can't talk about One Piece without talking about the Straw Hats. They're the main characters, they're the most important characters, and they are really good, well-written, well-structured characters. The One Piece live action doesn't get them right. It gets most of them close to right, but it misses key elements from every character that just kind of makes it go, that looks a little bit off. Or it just makes them lose entire massive moments that are really good for their characterization and some of their best moments in the East Blue Saga. Looking at Usopp and Sanji right now. Most of these issues come from trying to establish a tone that just doesn't fit the story. One Piece it's a goofy story that has some really dark world building. Like, everything happening in the world is really dark, but the Straw Hats are hopeful and, you know, joyful in the background. They are driven by their dreams. But the One Piece live action kind of just makes everyone kind of cynical and sad and annoyed. They get none of it right. So I'll go through them in character order, because why not? Go through the exact reasons why they did something wrong, and the little thing that they almost got right but kind of screwed up anyway. Luffy. Luffy is the most close to his character in the live action. He's a silly guy, he doesn't really take much seriously, he's, you know, always eating, always just being a weird guy. But there are a lot of ways, tiny ways, that you feel like this character isn't quite the same. Luffy in the One Piece live action is more childish silly than pure goofy silly. And that's like a weird, precise distinction that doesn't even make sense much, like critically when you think about it. But it's notable, it's noticeable. That he acts more like he doesn't really know what's going on, and that's why he's acting silly, instead of he knows exactly what's going on, he just doesn't care. That's what Luffy's like. And it also changes a lot of his moments, especially in the fight scenes. There's a major problem with the fight scenes overall that takes a bit away from Luffy's character. In the manga, in the East Blue, no one can challenge him. Maybe Don Krieg had a chance and Allong actually puts up a good fight, but other than that, absolutely no one can really fight Luffy in any meaningful way, which makes him sort of like a godlike goofy figure. He's above everything else because no one can stop him. So he just acts silly. But in the live action, the fights are more close quarters, they're more scraps. And it's done because the anime style of all being big attacks, they don't want to do that because they're kind of cowards. But it just takes a little bit away. But also, Luffy doesn't get mad much in the live action. Now, he gets mad at Allong, which, I mean, if he didn't get mad at Allong, that would just be bad writing, and I would have to dismiss the whole thing. But Luffy gets mad at a lot of his villains over the course of the East Blue, because the villains in the East Blue, which I will get into later, the villains in the East Blue portray giving up in a physical sense. Most of them are kind of losers, and they contrast with Luffy's vision of what piracy should be. And as a result, he gets mad at them because they're insulting pirating for him. He doesn't do that much in the live action, kind of because they just don't have time, and he just acts more aloof and silly, which just slightly detracts from his character. Obviously, Luffy is probably the best one done, and the actor's good, but there are little things all throughout this live action adaptation that make me think this could be better. Or maybe it couldn't be better. Maybe it's impossible to adapt, and maybe not everything should be in live action, because maybe live action is just not a good medium overall, and animation is just an objectively better medium. Zoro is the other best adapted character, but that's because he's kind of an easy character to adapt. There are some small issues with the way that he's adapted, and some major ones, but there are even some changes that I think could have been neat and could have worked out to make some things slightly better, but ended up actually dragging everything down because the changes weren't implemented properly. Zoro is a stoic character. That's part of his character. He acts aloof and edgy. I don't know if I know what the word aloof means. But he acts like that in the live action too. But he acts kind of like he is serious rather than he takes himself seriously. Once again, a small, kind of meaningless distinction, but Zoro takes himself seriously rather than is serious. He's a ridiculous character. He's always acting so serious, but he holds a sword in his mouth and runs around fighting with 3 swords like a crazy person. He's an equally insane character, and a lot of his moments portray this, but he's taken seriously by the narrative, which he shouldn't be. He shouldn't be taken seriously by the narrative, as he is in the One Piece live action. Now the changes, there are 3 big changes, and 2 of them could have been good, but screwed up later, and one of them is just kind of bad. First of all, his introduction. His introduction in the One Piece live action is fighting a guy from Broke Works and trisecting him, just cutting him into 3 pieces. He's just getting murdered on screen. And honestly, it works for his character. He's a pirate hunter before he joins the crew, so showing him killing a guy, that's fine. Zoro kills people. He's probably the most likely character to have killed the most people of the crew. But then they go on to screw it up by having that not go straight from seeing that to seeing him strung up in the yard. When he's strung up in the yard, after seeing that, you think, honestly, he probably should be there. He's dangerous. He just killed a guy. But, then you get more introduced to his character. You find out that he's a kind person at heart, despite giving off an air of aggression. But instead, they take him to he takes the body into a random bar like an insane person. Zoro probably would do that, but we shouldn't see it. That shouldn't be his secondary introduction. Then a random girl walks up to him and gives him some onigiri. You don't know who this girl is. She doesn't know who Zoro is. Why did she do that? It doesn't make any sense. In the original story, that happens after he's been strung up, and she takes him that food because he has no food, and he's being starved because he protected her from Helmo. And that's a really good moment when he tries to scare her off out of fear that she'll be punished. You get a bunch of little moments where you're like, oh, this guy's a good guy. But instead, it's just a random girl walks up to him and tries to give him some food. Then Helmo randomly shows up and tries to be a dick to her for no reason. And then Zoro eats the food off the ground for no reason. There's no reasoning behind any of it. It just takes all of the punch away from the moments. The things that happen, yeah, he gets strung up later on. None of it fits. None of it fits together. The other change that I think had a lot of potential, but they really dropped the ball on where to put it, was Zoro's backstory. There are plenty of backstories in One Piece. All of them are really good. Most of the backstories are put in a precise place for that character. But Zoro's isn't, because he's kind of, it's early installment weirdness. His introduction is just in the chapter that he's introduced, and then we get a backstory a couple chapters later. It's not a really well utilized backstory. But removing it from that place is a good choice, because then you can save it for a greater moment. When do they use the backstory? Or they just give it to us whilst he's climbing out of a well which he randomly got put in the middle of Usopp's arc. Okay, that doesn't really do anything. Now, the backstory shows that he's stubborn and is not going to give up until he becomes the world's strongest swordsman, but other than that, it doesn't really do anything. It just sort of shows, look at how cool this guy is. And look at how sad it is that his best friend died when he was young. But it doesn't do anything for that moment. And him falling in the well, they just put that in to take him out of the arc because they really gutted that arc, and I will talk about that later. But there was a really good place where you could have put that backstory. And I think that backstory would have been best utilized if they put it in the middle of the fight with Mihawk. Not before, not afterwards, in the middle. Once he gets stabbed with the little knife, we go into his backstory. And it'd be kind of jarring for the flow of things, but I think it could have really worked. That after he gets stabbed, he refuses to back out, and then we see his backstory, which shows him doing exactly that. He's not smart. He fought Quina every single day. He kept on trying to fight her every time he lost, but he never gave up, and he kept coming back because he wanted to be the best. And then we see that Quina died, and he promised that he was going to become the world's strongest swordsman for her. And then we cut back to this, and we're like, yeah, he can't back out. If he backs out now, he'll be giving up his dream. And obviously it contrasts him with Sanji, to have his backstory and Sanji's backstory in the same arc, showing that Zoro is willing to die for his dream, whereas Sanji is willing to give up his dream so no one has to die. It's a perfect contrast of their characters, which are contrasted throughout the entire story, and a really good place to put that backstory, which elevates the story. Instead of putting him in a goddamn well and just having him randomly remember, ooh, my past, I have to climb out of this well. Nami. What did they do to my girl? Who is this? And why did they change her so drastically? Okay. Nami is the most important character in the East Blue Saga. The final arc of the East Blue Saga, not counting Logtown, that's sort of like a mini arc. The entire final arc of the East Blue Saga centers around her. And it's a culmination of multiple character moments, and it's tied together by Nami's presence. And if her character is changed drastically, like it is in the One Piece live action, it doesn't have as much impact in any way. So first of all, they made the character just really cynical, and that's lame. Stop making characters cynical. That doesn't make things better, it just makes the characters more boring, okay? Nami is not a cynical character outwardly. She's probably internally quite cynical. That makes sense. Her life has been terrible, and she's, depressed. She thinks that her existence is a burden on others. She blames herself for Balma's death, obviously. There are multiple reasons why she would feel that way, but she doesn't display it, and that's incredibly important for her character. She acts pretty aloof, which is apparently a word I'm going to say for every single character's... It doesn't matter. She acts aloof, and I will learn what that word means if I use it for every character. She acts outwardly silly. You know, she acts charming, and she is a liar. She tricks people, she robs people, and she just does anything to get her way. Her introduction in the One Piece live action and the original are the same. She steals a boat from some pirates by pretending to be weak and dehydrated, and then lets them rob her and then steals their boat. It's a great moment for her character. Then she gets put in Zoro's introductory arc instead of being introduced in the Orangetown arc, and that messes things up for her. First of all, a thing I will get into later is that Allong doesn't want the goddamn Grand Line map. How do you misunderstand this character this badly? But it doesn't make sense for her to be trying to steal that map, unless she specifically just wants to sell it. That makes sense. But her stealing it for Allong, that's stupid and that shouldn't happen. So she shouldn't really want to take that much of a risk. She's just making money gradually by robbing people, and she only robs pirates. That's another important element of her character. She hates pirates until she meets Luffy and sees his ideal of a pirate, which contrasts with the other villains. Then, throughout her introduction, her personality is on display in the Orangetown arc, showing that she is, she's never serious. She's constantly putting a barrier between herself and reality until she finds out that Luffy's a pirate, at which point she gets really mad. She shows a bit of her true personality in being incredibly pissed off that he's a pirate and hating pirates. She hates Buggy, she hates Luffy, she just doesn't want to interact with them until later. And of course, this element of showing her personality slowly throughout that arc is perfectly utilized when we get the betrayal, which is one of the biggest moments of the East Blue Saga. And it's completely screwed up in the live action for no reason. They just changed it just for no reason. Instead of having Nami steal the Merry and sail away in the middle of a fight, in the middle of the chaos that's happening at the Baratier, which is a completely shocking moment. You're like, where is she going? What just happened? Why did she steal the boat? Nothing makes sense. And it's a perfectly reasonable reaction. It makes sense to have that reaction because that's what Oda is trying to give you in that scene. It's a shock at the betrayal. It's a proper betrayal. Instead, she just makes plans to leave, and then Allong shows up in the middle of the Baratier arc, and she goes with him because she was working for him the whole time. And that's a much weaker reveal. It's a weaker reveal because it doesn't have the element of betrayal, and it doesn't allow for many of the best moments in the Allong Park arc as the characters come face to face with her, learn more about her, and find out the different ways that she both isn't really loyal to Allong and didn't really betray them because subconsciously she does still care about them. The moment where she pretends to stab Usopp, the moment where Zoro threatens to drown himself and forces her to save him. They're amazing moments that just don't get given. And it's compounded and made much worse by the fact that the village didn't know that she was doing all of it to save them. That makes the entire Allong Park arc a lot weaker, which will probably be talked about later. Overall, our characters are just made a lot weaker. And also there's another minor one where she just doesn't do anything in the Allong Park arc, which is a lot worse. I mean in the final fight. In the original, they go straight from Luffy save me, and then they walk to Allong Park and Luffy's like, show me where is Allong, I'm gonna beat his ass. And then he gets beaten up and thrown in the pool, and the crew work together to save him, and Nami is there. Nami is present and actually helps during the interaction instead of just kind of being there. Usopp. what did they do? What did they do to your arc? Why did they just do that to you? Why did they destroy your arc and give it to everyone else? Just give little shreds of it to every other character's characterization and not even get that right. Alright. So, I'm a little pissed because Usopp is probably one of my favorites. So, I'm a little mad that they took all of his good moments and didn't give them to him. Usopp's actual character isn't too badly damaged. He's a storyteller and a liar who lies to make people feel better. But they did damage things in smaller ways that really messed things up. First of all, Usopp's biggest moment in the arc is the moment where no one believes him about Kuro. He goes throughout the village telling people there are pirates that are going to come and kill everyone and that Kaya is in danger, and they don't believe him because Kuro has developed a good image in the village. Then, after no one believes him, he decides to say that he was just lying. And then he resolves himself to go and fight off the pirates entirely on his own. It's a very strong moment for him. Even at the end of the arc, when Kaya shows up after having found out that it's true, he convinces Kaya and Mary and the little kids that they cut out of the arc to just tell everyone that he was lying and that he left afterwards, because he wants to preserve the peace of mind of the village by making everyone feel safe, that pirates wouldn't attack them. And that's why he lies. He lies to make people feel better. He lies to Kaya, telling her his stories to make her feel better while she's sick. He lies to the village, telling them every morning that the pirates are coming, which makes them feel safe because they know that it's a lie. They wake up every morning to this lie that pirates are coming, making them feel safe. It shows that Usopp's a caring character who tells lies to make people feel better. In the One Piece live action, he just runs around crying that they're pirates. No one even directly doesn't believe him. Instead of having people say that he's gone too far with how aggressive he is and how he's accusing Kuro of a crime and then chasing him out of town, they just don't show up. They just ignore him. And then he breaks down in the middle of the street knowing that no one will believe him. And then Kobe shows up and just ruins the moment and doesn't give him a moment to decide for himself to try and protect the village, because Kobe's here and now he's trying to convince the Marines. And then it doesn't even do anything because it doesn't change the story, because Kuro's just like, oh, I wasn't lying. I'm a cool guy. And then they just believe him and then they just leave. Which means that they ruined Usopp's big moment for no reason. There are some other ways that the live action really messes up with Usopp, and it's once again a symptom of the fact that the fights are made much less intense and much less grand. They take out most of the minions. Kuro has a whole crew of pirates that come to attack the village, and they get all cut out and just made into two guys. Meanwhile, Usopp doesn't get to fight anyone. Usopp doesn't get to protect anyone. He just stands around and does nothing in his arc. In the original, Luffy gets turned around and doesn't get to show up until later on, meaning that Usopp has to protect the village on his own for a little bit. He's trying to fight. Then Django is also there. There's a hypnotist. There's a massive crew, meaning that Usopp actually gets to do something and actually protects the village instead of Luffy doing absolutely everything. It's a severely weakened moment. There are other ways. Even in his one fight that he actually does get with the Fishman, he gets to be much less creative. In the live action, he just shoots his alcohol with a fire star and then he dies. And it's like, that is essentially what he does in the original, but he doesn't just shoot one thing. In the original, he does a bunch of things before he reaches that conclusion of the fight. And there's an important moment where he considers running away. He thinks, I've led him away, I don't have to take this fight, that's a Fishman, he's way stronger than me, I could just run away. But he decides not to, because he wants to be a brave warrior of the sea. As a result, he, fights back, and he uses a bunch of gadgets, and then he hits him with a hammer a bunch of times at the end of the fight, which is a funny moment for him. And they just cut everything out. Sanji. Look, it takes a real Sanji fan to really hate Sanji. So clearly there were real Sanji fans working on the One Piece live action. Because they just gave him nothing. First of all, the Baratier arc just doesn't happen, which is insane. They just cut out Don Krieg and Jin and Pearl and the entire Baratier arc, where the Baratier gets attacked by pirates, is just cut down to the Allong pirates show up for like 10 minutes to beat up Luffy and take Nami. Why did they do that? Why did they do that? Why did they cut everything at the expense of everything? It means that Sanji just doesn't get anything in this arc. Baratier arc is the first introduction to Sanji, and we learn a lot about his personality. Our introduction to him is him beating someone up because they wasted food, which shows that he's, a really aggressive person. He's also a person with strong ideals. And then, shortly afterwards, we get introduced to Jin, who is a pirate who works for the Don Krieg pirates who everyone hates. And all the other cooks refuse to give him food because he's a pirate who's a part of Don Krieg's crew. And they're like, if you feed him, he's just going to go back to his crew and bring his pirates back here, and he's going to screw everything up. But Sanji says, if someone's hungry, I feed them. That's my rule. That's what he has to do. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It's like his rule about never hitting a woman. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter if it'll get him killed. He won't break it because that's his rule. That's his trauma, frankly. We get the reasoning behind that with his backstory, where we see he nearly starved to death, and he thinks he can never let anyone else starve ever again, which is why he'll feed anyone, no matter what. That's a really important moment for his character, and it just gets cut. It just gets cut. He doesn't feed someone that he shouldn't. Jin comes back with Don Krieg, by the way, and that's how the entire arc starts, where Don Krieg also wants to be fed, and Zeph feeds him, which shows the contrast, which shows the comparison between Zeph and Sanji, seeing how they're very much the same. And then that starts a whole arc where Don Krieg is trying to take over the Baratier, and Sanji is never told that he's wrong for his decision. His decision was a good thing to do, because at the end of the arc, Jin saves Sanji by giving him his gas mask. It shows that his decision, whilst it caused some problems, it was a morally right decision, and he is rewarded for it. Instead, Sanji just does nothing. He does nothing for the whole arc. He gives Luffy some food, but Luffy's really nice, and everyone would have done that. Everyone does do that. That's how basically every arc starts. It's so bad. Part 2. The villains. Villains make a story. That is, a principle of writing. And in the East Blue, the villains are quite strong thematically. They're not really the best of the villains. One Piece has very good villains, but East Blue Saga doesn't have the best of the best. Apart from Buggy D. Clown, obviously. But the One Piece live action still manages to cut them up and change them in little ways, and a couple of major ways, that just make them weaker overall, and make the arcs around them weaker, and make the themes of the entire saga weaker. I don't have as much to say about these guys. I'm just gonna quickly go over Alvida, Don Krieg, and Axe Hand, because Alvida is basically the same. She's a villain for one chapter. Axe Hand is changed in that he has a bit more screen time, and of course Don Krieg just doesn't show up. He just died immediately after fighting Mihawk off screen, which is dumb, because when Jin comes back, it's going to be the greatest moment in the final saga, obviously. Jin said he was coming back in the Grand Line. It's going to happen. We all believe. Buggy. Where do we start with Buggy? I'm just going to say Buggy is a victim of coulrophobia. Look, they can't make a clown villain who's just silly. In the original One Piece, Buggy is an insane, goofy villain. Like, he's just a clown, and his crew is a circus crew. And they're villains because they rob people and hunt for treasure and stuff, but, like, they are a goofy ass circus. Like, they're actually, they're a lion tamer, a sword thrower, an acrobat, and a clown. And instead of that, Buggy's just kind of clown, coded. Like, he's just an evil clown. He's just a boring evil clown instead of this wacky ass character. And he's liked, he's a decent character. He sticks around, he's foul mouthed. But that's not Buggy. That's not my Buggy, okay? That's not my Buggy D Clown. King of Charisma. I can't see One Piece live action's Buggy accidentally in his way to the top of a massive syndicate of hundreds of powerful pirates just by having a lot of charisma. This guy's not charismatic, he's just kind of there. Plus, they really don't go into his relationship with Shanks and his views on pirates and treasure. Because Buggy is probably the closest pirate to One with Hopes that's in the East Blue. He does kind of want to go to the Grand Line. I mean, he mostly does it just to chase after Luffy, but he does want to hunt for treasure. He's a believer, unlike most of the other villains. But obviously, his portrayal of treasure is contrasted with Luffy, and he doesn't get to attack Luffy's hat. That doesn't happen, and that's a really important moment, both for his character and for Nami's, when she sees that Luffy believes that the greatest treasure is something that a friend gave him rather than physical money. It's just a weaker moment overall for all characters. And the One Piece live action's Buggy is a fun character, kind of, but he's nothing compared to Buggy the Clown. The real Buggy the Clown, not this blasphemy. Kuro. Kuro just winds up looking like an idiot. Okay, his plan is just completely cut down to the bare minimum, and as a result, his plan looks like it's stupid and was never going to work. In the original, his plan is to work under Kaya for a couple of years so that everyone believes that she would write him into her will, and then he gets his crew of pirates to attack the island, killing a bunch of people, including Kaya, and then he gets rid of the crew, and then boom, his identity is concealed and he has a bunch of money. In the live action, his plan is, I guess, just to convince her to write him into his will just via his own merits, rather than use a hypnotist to do it, which was a much more concrete plan that was actually likely to work. And then on top of that, he just kills Mary out of nowhere for very little reason. Like, you were gonna get caught. How is this a plan? How is this plan ever going to work? How did you get away with it for this long? He's not portrayed as a smart character. And just for the record, I don't think the original Kuro is very smart. His plan isn't great. But it's an actual plan that someone who's, a long schemer and a planner would actually come up with. Then on top of that, cutting out the rest of his crew really ruins moments for other characters, as I mentioned earlier. But it also means that we don't get to show his core contrast with Luffy, which all the villains in East Blue Saga do. In fact, most of the villains in One Piece do. Villains have to contrast the hero. That's how villains work. Kuro doesn't like being a pirate. He hates being a pirate, and he wants to give up that life. And also betrays his crew and plans to kill them once he's done with his mission, because then no one will know his identity. Luffy obviously contrasts with this because he actually cares about his crew, and in his view, being a pirate is the best thing you can be. So someone insulting it by saying it's terrible, he hates that. He's like, being a pirate is all about being free, but you just want to have some money. And then obviously they contrast. He's more angry. Luffy never gets angry in the live action. And then he hits him with the Gum Gum Bell, knocks him out. And it's a good moment. There is a fundamental misunderstanding of how Allong's character fits into the later narrative of One Piece. He's a character who's introduced early on as one way, and slowly as the world building develops and we know more about the world and the characters, especially fishmen, we learn more about why Allong is like that, and how his situation is both slightly tragic, but also a lot more hateable. He is a more hateable villain because of it. Instead, we just have him spouting like rhetoric and wanting to explore the Grand Line, which he should not do. In the original One Piece, Allong is a coward. He is a total coward. He lives in East Blue because that's where all the weak people are, so he can enslave and torment humans whilst no one can stop him. He would not want to go to the Grand Line because he knows he can't make it there, because he used to be on the Grand Line, which is something that gets revealed later. Allong will not talk to humans about fishman oppression, because that would just let him know that he's a clear hypocrite in his enslavement and hatred of humans. He doesn't bring up that fishmen are hated, he just has that as part of his backstory, which is revealed later on, so you can see that why Allong became that kind of person, but also you can continue to hate him because Fisher Tiger told him not to hate humans, and he still went and enslaved a bunch of people and tortured people. He's a bad person. Don't have him start talking about, oh, fishmen are so oppressed, that's why I do this, that's why this world is better with me in charge, I'm gonna go to the Grand Line and dominate it. No, you misunderstand his character. He shouldn't be talking about these sorts of things. He shouldn't be thinking ahead. Allong is a coward who lives in the East Blue because that's the only place he can make it at. And it makes his character seem less complex in the East Blue saga, which is the obvious reason why they decide to try and put all this extra stuff in. But it makes the character worse that they're trying to garner a little bit of sympathy for him or cash in on the world building of fishman oppression too early. It has to be something that is built up, sets in, and then way later starts to pay off. Now, obviously, the live action isn't going to make it anywhere near that far into the story, but they shot themselves in the foot in the rare occasion that they do, because they'll harm those future reveals via this half character. Also, once again, harmed by the weaker fights in One Piece due to the lack of want to be ridiculous, and we get to do like one wacky attack, maybe. Part 3, the Marines. Okay, this is the big change in the live action, that they put a bunch of emphasis on Kobe, Helmo, and Garp, and in doing so, just did some terrible things. They completely screwed Garp's character all off the deep end. And I do like that they put in more Kobe and Helmo. It's cool to see more of those characters and see a little bit of their earliest development instead of just seeing how they are after they've developed when they appear later on. I mean, I think we're probably going to get a bit more backstory on the two later on in the main product, but seeing a little bit of it here, it's an interesting thing to have. It was not worth all the screen time they ate up. They ate up so much screen time for other characters, they ate up a bunch of moments, and they killed Garp's like whole character by making him this stoic figure who's nothing like Luffy at all, and really will not fit the roles that he fills in the future story. Not that they're going to make it there, I keep on harping on this, but the live action has shot itself in the foot too many times. Kobe and Helmo. These two are made into a sort of package deal by the live action, which works, because Kobe's development isn't really that important. Kobe's just a really good person. He's kind and stuff, and he wants to join the Marines because he wants to help people. His main development is that he gets a bunch stronger and then is able to help people. But his big moments don't come now, they come in later arcs like Marineford and, the Reverie. But despite that, despite Kobe being such an easy character to get, they still killed one of his only moments. Kobe does not have much screen time, and they still managed to remove one of his moments. How do you screw this up so bad? In the first arc, with Alvida, Kobe stands up to Alvida, and then Luffy punches her. it doesn't go that Luffy is like, oh, Kobe said that you sucked, and then Alvida's like, is this true? And then Kobe doesn't say anything. No, Alvida is like, tell me who the best pirate on the sea is, and Kobe is like, I can't take this anymore. Screw you, you suck. I don't want to do this anymore. I would rather fight you and die than live on this ship for another moment. And then Luffy is like, you're pretty cool, and then he punches her. It's a good moment for his character that he stands up for himself before Luffy stands up for him. It's an important moment for his character, and it's like one of his only moments in the first, like, 400 chapters of One Piece before he appears again. So why did they do it? Why did they cut it out? It would have been such an easy moment to do, and it shows that they just kept on missing clear things that were like, and it shows that they keep on missing little things that they obviously should have done and kept. Helmo is a good change. I like him hanging around Kobe being the way that he kind of stops being such a dick. He's an asshole who is just barely not enough of a jerk to go, okay, I'm not going to kill this little girl, Dad. What are you talking about? I don't care that she disrespected me. We're not going to kill this little girl. And then that develops into, by hanging out with Kobe, who's just a really, who's just a pure individual, he slowly becomes a better person. That's a neat thing to have. Once again, not worth Garp. Look, Garp was clearly just entirely taken as a tool for the Marine arc that they wanted to do. Like, the writers of the live action were like, we really need a little bit of propaganda, so we gotta show that the Marines are actually great. And we're gonna use Garp and just butcher up this character nice and clean so that we can have Kobe and Helmo having a bit of an arc. And it was bad. It was really bad. This is not Garp. I don't know who this is. This is not my Garp. I appreciate the old man Yowie, but this is not Garp. What did you do to my guy? To really interrogate why this character just is nothing to do with Garp, you kind of have to understand Garp as a character, which is hard. He's kind of a complicated character. He's basically a character who has given up on life at the start of the series, kind of because Garp's philosophy is that the future generation is the only thing that matters. In his opinion, his life is meaningless because he's old, and his only purpose is pushing on the future generations, but he has failed to make Ace or Luffy or Dragon, anyone else, into a Marine like him. So Kobe sort of revitalizes him as someone who idolizes him and looks up to him and is a good person who wants to join the Marines. In that way, Kobe takes on more of a son-like role than Luffy ever did. He still cares about Luffy, obviously, but he's accepted the fact that Luffy's not going to listen to him by this point. He's moved on from that. So, he would not spend any amount of effort to stop Luffy. And let me tell you, if he was trying for even 1 second to stop Luffy in the East Blue Saga, he would have. He could have jumped off of his boat, picked their boat up, and thrown it back onto Luffy's home island, and just say, you stay there, or I will throw you back onto your island. He could have done whatever he wanted. He is so broken. So having him be there, be present the whole time, being actively trying to stop Luffy, makes no sense, both from a character standpoint and from a physical, how would he not be able to stop them standpoint. But Garp is a complicated character, and he's an interesting character, but introducing him this early on just messes up multiple things. Another reason Garp shouldn't be introduced so early on is because it takes away from Smoker's introduction. Smoker is basically the first Marine who isn't awful, or who's competent and not awful. There's a Marine that got cut out who basically tries to fight Allong because he hears about the corruption and is immediately obliterated. His entire crew is wiped out, kind of to show how strong Allong is. So Smoker, who was introduced in Logtown right at the end of the East Blue Saga, is basically the one Marine who is both good at his job and also not an asshole. his introduction is good. It's a great character introduction, which is softened by the fact the guy's been here the whole time, being a competent and although kind of an asshole for no reason. He is, actively trying to help people. So it just detracts from the story to have Garp there. Not that Smoker even shows up. I mean, I assume he'll show up if they make a second season. They teased him at the end, but I don't know how well they're going to pull him off. Part 4, the side characters. Look, I can't go into every single character in One Piece. I could. I honestly could go into every single character in the East Blue Saga and give a reason why they aren't as good as they are originally. But I can't do that. But I would like to get into a couple of side characters that just got flat out cut from the story or got changed so significantly that their role in the story is completely ruined. There's a lot of side characters in every arc of One Piece, and most of them serve a pretty good purpose for the theme or for the tone or just the general qualities of an arc. And most of them are cut or removed or get no lines or anything of the sort. Windmill Village and the Red Hair Pirates. Windmill Village is only seen briefly in the first episode, and we get a little glimpse of Luffy's backstory. Now, first of all, most of the side characters are just kind of yoinks. Off they go, they're gone. Which takes a bit of the life out of the area. Most of the side characters are cut out, which just takes life out of the entire series. That there aren't any characters who are sort of like, hey, that's a person. That's a human person in this story. That isn't just a main character or a main villain. And of course, the Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates, they are pretty well portrayed. They just don't really take much seriously, which fits. That's what they're sort of like. They are basically the Straw Hats, but more accomplished. But they are weakened in their characterization by their one fight, once again, making all the fights more fighty, more physical fighty. They just shoot a bunch of the bandits. They just shoot a bunch of mountain bandits with guns. You never get the sense that these people are so overwhelmingly stronger that the only reason they don't fight is because it's completely meaningless to them. They're so far above these mountain bandits that there's no reason to fight them. It's meaningless. And when they do fight them, one guy can effortlessly take them out without even firing his weapon, because they're just nothing compared to them. And they only fight because they have to protect the honor of someone who they care about. As a result, their portrayal, they just seem less cool and less overwhelming. Orange Town citizens, and more specifically, Chew. Yep, I am going to talk about how cutting out a dog weakens the story. One Piece, it's a story with a lot of themes and a lot of characters that reinforce those themes, and just cutting little ones out makes big moments weaker. It cuts out entire character moments from other major characters. Chew is a little dog. He protects this pet shop that his owner owned, and then his owner died and never came back, so he stays there and guards it all the time. Even when the pirates invade the village and start stealing everything, and everyone else flees, that dog stays there protecting its place. And it's a good moment because it contrasts with Luffy, as they both see something other than money as their treasure. And of course Luffy gets angry on the dog's behalf because they destroy the place and beat it up. It's a great moment for Luffy. It's a reason why Nami decides to go with them and starts to think Luffy's a cool guy who is kind and who she feels bad about betraying and doesn't want to stay with because she'll constantly have to think about betraying them. Cutting them out, as well as the few other Orange Town citizens who explain the story of the dog and decide to try and protect it and help it, takes away also a lot of the agency. There's no agency of the people in the live action. The citizens just sort of are there and are beaten up and killed, and then the pirates show up and they fight them. The people don't seem like they have personality and dreams. Like, the Orange Town citizens are scared of Buggy because he's dangerous and strong. But they decide to fight back against him because They are people with personalities. When they see what he's done to Chu, they decide they want to fight back against him. And Luffy is there to fight him for them because he's strong. But even if they don't do anything, cutting them out and not having them present just makes the world feel less lived in. This is going to be the criticism of every side character that gets cut. Syrup Village. The most notably cut characters from Syrup Village is Usopp's crew. The three little kids that hang around with him and kind of idolize him. The guy who tells them lies and they enjoy his stories and want to follow him. And he inspires them to think pirates are cool. Cutting them out of the arc just makes Usopp a lot more lonely, first of all. It gives him no one who actually interacts with him other than Kaya. And the presence of those kids who respect him takes away a bit of his characterization. Obviously, the decision to just kill off Mary like that, I mean, it makes sense that he would die after getting stabbed, kind of, but it also makes it so that the conclusion of the arc, where they decide to pretend it was all a lie to protect the minds of the villagers, can't happen. But it doesn't matter because we don't get introduced to the villagers at all, so it doesn't matter that anything is done to protect them, protect their minds, because we don't know who they are, we don't care about them. We don't see that after Usopp leaves, they start to think, it's so weird that Usopp didn't tell us the pirates are coming. You know, he's always coming in for his daily lie. You see that they care about him in little ways that they don't even notice themselves until he's gone. And of course, with Usopp's crew continuing his legacy by starting to do the lie themselves, it's a great moment and a great conclusion for that arc. But they get cut from it, Mary dies, so Kaya is just completely alone now because she doesn't have any butlers, Mary's dead, the kids don't exist, and we don't know anyone in the village. So Kaya's ultimate fate is just kind of way sadder, where she's just left on this island alone with no one else. No more whimsy. Kokoyashi Village. Oh, this is the worst one by far. There's one big change that's made in the One Piece live action, and it's like probably one of the worst changes, and it's the fact that Nojiko doesn't like Nami, and the village think that she betrayed them and doesn't realize that she's doing it all for them. That is like one of the worst changes because it ruins one of the best moments for Nami and for the entire story. As well as changing up the backstory with Belmare with a little change that just takes away from Nami's character of her own self-hatred. So, first of all, the fact that the village doesn't know that Nami joined Allong's crew in order to buy back the village and save them all is stupid. It takes away their agency and makes it so that they just are victims and they just hate Nami for no reason. And then when the moment where they decide to go and fight Allong after Allong betrays Nami and steals all her money is completely lost, because that is one of the best moments. It's the moment directly precursoring Luffy help me. Nami nearly collects all the money, Allong has a marine guy come in and steal it, she goes to take down Allong, the villagers find out what happened and she tells them to just wait a little longer and she'll buy their freedom. They decide that they are sick and tired of bending to Allong's will and they're gonna go fight him where they live or die. They don't care anymore because they wanted to give Nami a chance to try and help them because she wanted to do it so bad, but now they're just gonna fight Allong because they have nothing left to lose. And then Nami stabs her arm being mad about Allong because she's certain that he's gonna kill all of them, and then Luffy shows up. Instead, they have to do the reveal in that moment where Nojiko talks to Nami slightly before, and then they reveal that she was doing it for them, and then Nojiko defends her to the town, and then they decide to fight Allong, and the whole moment is messed up. It doesn't flow nearly as well. The actual moment of Luffy help me is a good moment. It's cool, you know, it feels cool, but then they mess it up even more because they don't walk directly to Allong Park. They don't go straight from that into Luffy busts down the door of Allong Park and is like, where is Allong? I'm gonna beat him up. No, instead there's like a delay where they go to the village and then the village has been burned down and then a day passes and then they go fight Allong. It messes up all the flow. The One Piece live action never gets the flow right. And even the little changes, like the backstory with Belmare. One of the big, most tragic parts about it is that the last thing Nami did before Bellman was killed was argue with her and say that she hated her. And then when Allong comes in and says, if you have any kids, you gotta pay for them, Bellman decides to sacrifice herself by revealing that she has the kids because she can't bring herself to deny that they're her kids. That's the strong moment. And then Nami blames herself for that for basically her entire life. That's like part of her characterization. That's why she thinks of herself as evil. It's a massive character moment, and it gets removed by having the backstory have a bonus scene where Nami apologizes to Bellman later on, which weakens the whole thing. Like, it's a nice moment, sure, but it weakens the tragedy of the situation, which is a major part of it. It's a sad story. Alright, I think I've ranted about why the One Piece live actions changes damage the story for maybe a bit too long now. But all my points stand. If you like the One Piece live action, you should read One Piece because it's a million times better. And honestly, I'd be disappointed because you didn't get the original experience and instead got the experience that messed a lot of things up. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but it could have been so much better.
I'm really not hungry right now, Nami.
This is just a little addendum recorded afterwards to acknowledge that, yeah, I did just say multiple things are objectively wrong. Like, I thought Nojiko was Nami in the fight with Allong, and she actually doesn't do anything. But I don't want to re-record anything because, no. And if you think that's wrong, you read One Piece and then make an hour-long video on it, and then you can tell me that I'm lame.